living in a rural village, no running water, no electricity, and essentially being a doula in a Middle Atlas mountain village for 2.5 years, different language, different religion. You just learn a lot about people. And ultimately, when you are able to understand how people operate, you can help drive behavior change. And I think that that concept is what ultimately you need to think about when you are a team leader and thinking through navigating change in healthcare. But I also think it matters when you're thinking about the patient experience.
When I started inspiring women, I had one clear mission to advance the next generation of women leaders. This show is for you. Whether you're climbing the corporate ladder, building your own business, or navigating the complex world of healthcare leadership. That's why I'm asking you to please take a few minutes and fill out our quick 5 question survey. Your feedback will help shape the future of this show, what topics we cover, which guests we feature, and how we can best support your leadership goals. Visit inspiringwomen.show/survey to share your thoughts. That's inspiringwomen.show/survey. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to today's conversation. This is Inspiring Women. I'm Lori McGraw, and today I'm speaking with Sonia Millsom, and she is the CEO of Oxeon, where she is reimagining healthcare by placing the best leaders at all the tables, executive tables, boardroom tables, and on the cap table. Sonia is a longtime executive. She is 30 years in transforming healthcare. Former chief commercial officer at Maven, the first women's health unicorn, also at Iora Health. She is the board member to many companies, an advisor also to many. And my favorite thing, Sonia, about your bio and your background is that you're raising 2 daughters to be the next generation of strong women. Thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Lori, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, let's dive in. You've been at Oxeon for a few years now, and that's
Mhm.
a really important company, placing so many executives across so many different leadership realms. I want to start with this all the tables, executive, boardroom, and cap table. Now, why is this comprehensive approach essential for transforming healthcare?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think now that I've had more experience than I choose to admit, many, many years, you see companies both in different phases of growth and how you have to shift and pivot right over time. Most of these organizations aren't successful linearly. And I think what oftentimes when something goes wrong, you say, oh, it was a bad CEO or there was a problem. But the reality is you need this combination of both, you know, great investors, particularly when you're doing early stage and you need patient capital and you need investors as well as operators around that board table to help you think about what's next. You need an amazing management team, of course, but you also need individuals who are thinking through, again, what that next phase of growth is, what the company needs to do to be successful. And I don't think that's one dimensional. I think most people think it's just one thing that maybe something goes wrong. And the reality is it's a combination of factors that make companies wildly successful.
Sonia, you've been at companies and led them to billion-dollar exits. You know what it means to have really successful companies with success, leadership, growth, all of things. But you've done that as an executive, sort of like as part of that senior leadership team. Now you're placing all of these leaders. So what's the difference?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's two aspects to that. I think the first is ultimately, I think high performing teams have high degrees of psychological safety. They are able to be really transparent. They are able to win and fail together and kind of get up and think over and over again about what needs to get done. I think the other thing is that as I've looked at it both as the experience as executive, and now that you see so many of these executives over time at Oxeon, you've got 13 years worth of data where we see is successful. And ultimately, I think it comes down to 5 key attributes. The first is adaptability. So, is an individual able to go into a new environment and adapt to what's happening, both from the external market perspective as well as internally? The second is reliability. Do you do what you say you're going to do? Are you able to, keep your word? The third is clock speed and decision making. I mean, I think this is the most important one. Ultimately, we have to make decisions fast, and you won't always make the right decision, But if you don't, are you nimble enough to correct course and kind of move on to what's next? Fourth is culture carry. And again, that goes back to that psychological safety aspect. And the last is
Culture what? Culture care.
carrier. Yeah,
Okay.
carrier. So, are you demonstrating the values of a business? Are you doing what you say and acting in terms of what you're doing? Sometimes that's making decisions around the no's as well as what the yeses are, right? In order to drive success and bring, again, that high performance and psychological safety within the organization. And I think it's particularly important in healthcare, right? I mean, we are taking care of people and doing the right thing when people are often at their most vulnerable. So those cultural values really matter, I think, in organizations. And then lastly is this concept of Pied Piper or servant leadership. Can you attract and retain amazing talent? Because ultimately a leader is only as good as the team that is around them. And, if you cannot keep people and you can't like help both build professionally, then organization, bring them up in a professional development perspective and also bring new talent into the organization when you need it, it's very difficult to be successful as a leader.
I want to dig into what you said. You talked about psychological safety. Do you think that's increasing, decreasing? I mean, we are living in some really, challenging times, and things are moving at a different clock speed than what I would say is normal.
Yes.
So, how do you think about psychological safety? Where is it increasing? Where is it becoming more fragile? And then what do you do about it?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's the reality is that the world is changing so incredibly fast, and there's so much uncertainty that is in the external world, right? You look at world wars, you look at what's happening on the government level, you look at regardless of your politics, right? Things are changing. You look at what's happening then on people's day to day, right? There are tragedies happening every single day that impact people, whether it's everything from gun violence to other things. It's really difficult. And I think the way that I have at least thought about it for my own team, and I encourage others to, is this think again mentality from Adam Grant is the one who's developed this, which really encourages you to move away from the concept of a preacher, I'm going to tell you how it's done, this prosecutor, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, this politician mindset, which is like really defending your belief, and really towards a scientist mindset. And the whole point of that is when you are kind of stepping back and able to evaluate what's happening in your environment with a little bit less emotion and more data and information. And again, make choices quickly. They won't always be the right ones. And when things go wrong, you can say, okay, like we made the decision based on the best information that we had. It didn't work, and let's move forward. And when people feel that way, I think they're able to, you know, be able to thrive in an environment that has a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's the best way to do it. You've got to just be able to kind of think again, sit back, take the time to not just move so fast all the time, but to actually to evaluate information in order to make decisions as a team.
Sonia, I need you as my personal coach, my personal executive coach. I am literally signing you up. I want to turn a question back to you. So you've, from the Peace Corps time when you were a volunteer, now as a CEO. So you've witnessed a lot of healthcare failures in Morocco back in the day. And now how has that shaped your leadership style and approach even today?
Yeah, I mean, the Peace Corps was an unbelievable experience very early in my career. I believe when you put yourself in uncomfortable situations is when you grow the most. So, living in a rural village, no running water, no electricity, and essentially being a doula in a Middle Atlas mountain village for 2.5 years, different language, different religion, you just learn a lot about people. And ultimately, when you are able to understand how people operate, you can help drive behavior change. And I think that concept is what ultimately you need to think about when you are a team leader and as you're thinking through navigating change in healthcare. But I also think it matters when you're thinking about the patient experience. I mean, ultimately, when you see through the days, and I've been very fortunate to be through companies that have been kind of at the cutting edge and the very forefront, whether they're big, large, publicly traded companies like United Healthcare or the innovation areas like Maven or Iora, and even Oxeon in the way that we operate. You have to be able to understand what comes down to the very basic level of how the patient is interacting and how the provider is interacting. And when you think about that, you're able to redefine the way that you think about healthcare and how it should be delivered. And that is really, I think, what has been my guiding force of like, if you can keep those things in mind, and it applies to the customer ultimately, right? Whether we don't see patients at Axion, but who's our customer, whether it's an investor,
Mhm.
whether it's a company CEO, what is it the problem that they're trying to solve? And how can you build solutions that allow you to do that for them?
But the playbooks have changed. And so if we think back to your enormously successful career, Maven, Iora, and other companies, those companies that had tremendous success, they were at times when we were in a digital health revolution. There was all kinds of valuations. And the circumstances of business, of funding, you know about all of these things. So how does the playbook of yesterday apply to the playbook of today? How do you advise the leaders that you're placing, whether board level or investing or CEOs or other C suites? What are you advising them in terms of how to take the strategy lessons that you've learned and apply them to the businesses that they're leading today?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I appreciate the compliment on the successes, but I think the reality is that we all have like nonlinear paths, right? Nothing is up and to the right all the time. I know that
I
you've
wish it
seen this
was.
in your
I wish it
career. Yeah, I
was.
wish it was, right? But I think when those times of when things go down is actually where you learn the most, right? It's where, again, you've got to pivot, where you've got to think again about what the business needs to be. And so ultimately, I think, like let's take Iora, for example, right? We were at the very forefront of value based care. There weren't playbooks that existed.
Right.
So we had to take the pieces of information that we knew, what was important to payers, what was important to providers, and what was important to patients, and put those things together. I think ultimately you want to make sure that you are solving a problem that has a big addressable market. Ultimately, you also want to have great investors that are around the table. Again, hard problems require patient capital in order to solve them. If you're looking for the quick up and out, it's really difficult in healthcare. It's just the reality, the combination of regulatory and the difficulties of scale
Yep.
and the environments. And I think, your willingness again to pivot when things get difficult and really understanding what's happening in the market and how do you meet that market demand and catch the things on the upswing, right? I mean, we did our value-based care work at Iora. We were serving Taft-Hartley organizations, employers. And then when things started to move really into the Medicare Advantage direction is really where we were able to do that. And we were able to really combine the incentives that allowed us to provide great care to our patients and ultimately have a very successful financial outcome as well. But that was hard work. And again, not a nonlinear path in terms of where it was in order to be successful. And I think the same applies to places like Maven. Kate was at the very forefront of understanding the voice of the customer of women's health. And her business also pivoted multiple times and like thinking about what needed to get there. And then ultimately she was able to build a moat and continues to build, upon that platform to really serve women and families at all stages of their life. And I think that is again what ultimately is what drives success.
You talked about pivots a number of times. And I think today, in just this world of, incredible technology, AI, you name it, but the trends are, we talk about things moving fast. I think I'm seeing pivots happen at a different pace than in my own 30 years in healthcare technology innovation. And so, just with all these years for yourself of pattern recognition of what it takes to build a team, what it takes to build a successful company. What do you think today people are, perhaps leaders are missing in terms of pattern recognition that they should be thinking about? What are you seeing? What are you suggesting?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, you hit on one of the most important ones, AI, right? I think, again, there's no playbook to exactly how that is
Mhm.
going to impact, we think about the future of healthcare and really the future of the workforce, right? We had our all company meeting last week and we had a physician, Dr. Alistair Arkstein. I don't know if you know him, but he was, from Emory, and he helped to build the first Apple Epic hospital that had and he gave the example of ambient listening cameras in rooms that allowed him and the organization to prevent and predict patients that were going to fall out of bed. And how that had an impact on how people were taking care of them, obviously the financial impact, the quality of care impact. So I think we have to really, understand like that impact of AI and embrace it in a way that might be uncomfortable. Some might say like, oh, where's the camera in my room? But if ultimately, if that changes the way that we're able to predict what challenges there may be, you can have a real impact. I think obviously that comes in our day-to-day work, right? Too. Like we see note taking place in a different way. We're seeing AI scribing, all those things. I think the other couple of things I would mention on the like kind of like trends are multi-generational workforce. People at different stages in their lives and career want different things from work. And I think back to the point earlier of so much uncertainty in the world when things are shaky on so many levels, they look for that stability in work in a way
Mhm.
that is bringing community, thinking about cultural values, having a point of view and the voice in the world politically, of course, financially, family flexibility in terms of what that looks like, right? And for somebody like me who's in the empty nest versus somebody who's early career and everything in the middle, I think it's a challenging place to really think about how do you optimize a workforce that has very different values essentially when they're coming into the organization. I think the other piece that's really interesting is this point about women and positions of power. By 2030, women will control $34 trillion in financial assets. And when you think about the combination of that financial strength and power and influence with what we've always known that women actually are the most decision makers of healthcare ultimately,
That's
right?
right.
We are the biggest consumers. You think about how that could change, right? What are the value driven spending opportunities that come? And you see some of them, but this community orientation, elder care, unpaid caregivers, right? Many of us play that role. I play that myself within my family and have for friends. Childcare, right? Providing the right resources so that women can be in the workforce. Funding for research. It was 1993 when I graduated from college when we first had women in clinical trials. Like we need to think again about what that looks like. And I think women tend to be, more proactive healthcare consumers. And so I think when you start to put those things together, I think it's a trend that we are going to see big, hopefully very positive ramifications as a result.
Well, I hope so, Sonia. And if you think about, just moving to women in leadership, I mean, in addition to those trend lines, $34 trillion, that's a new number from me. And that's an awesome number to be thinking about. At the same time, though, we have some headwinds that are pretty strong. I mean, we are losing an enormous generation of women scientists with all of the cuts that are being made and the research, which had been moving in a positive direction, we're seeing it level out, if not just like go away in terms of those opportunities. So I think a lot and spend a lot of time thinking about the leadership pipeline, in particular for women, because we had been making so much progress and it had been going steadily up. Once the pandemic happened, we saw a lot of women drop out of the leadership workforce
Mhm.
altogether. We've got kind of a big hole in the leaky middle pipeline. And I think we've got some new challenges ahead of us. You're shaping the leadership pipeline of the future. So, as you do that at Oxeon, what are you seeing? Do you see systemic change happening for the positive? Do you see challenges ahead? And if so, what are you doing about them?
Yeah. I do see change. It's slow, but again, this concept of the tortoise versus the unicorn, right? Slow and steady wins the race. I think that's how we have to think about it because when you are driving systemic change, again, back to
The unicorn, you are from your unicorn experience.
no, yes, but I think again, like even that, it was 10 years of really hard work, for
Mhm.
that to happen. It didn't happen overnight, right? The
Right.
example at Iora. And so I think we have to be patient around these things. And I think the hardest thing, you mentioned pattern recognition. I think that was one of the things that was the most surprising for me coming to Oxeon. I've been in so many different leadership tables, but the the ability for investors and CEOs to say, what's the pattern recognition that allows me to see success? And oftentimes it is based on financial metrics only. They
Mhm.
haven't dug deeper to understand those concepts that I talked about earlier on like those leadership attributes. Because right now, in particular, when you have a down market cycle, you don't have as many women that have those financial outcomes and have had that success. And so you have to go deeper to understand what are the things and where are the places that women in particular have, or anybody really, has been resilient in their ability to navigate change and had success. And it might not be a unicorn or billion-dollar exit, but it may be that they've turned around the business and created profitability. It may be that they have brought a new line of business and, created a new organic growth path or inorganic growth path. Those are the things that we have to really think about. And I think, in full candor, a lot of investors who all are like doing the right thing, they're trying to have the right financial value and value creation for the businesses they're investing in. But often they're not operators. They haven't been in a
Yeah.
business. You have, I have, that it doesn't always operate the way that the underwriting model is. And you have to be able to shift and adapt around that. And so we have to just encourage people to be open minded about what talent is. And back to the point about AI, right now in particular, there's no playbook for that. So the people who are able to embrace that, to again have done different things and connect dots really quickly, the people who aren't afraid to have quick innovation, fail fast, and move on, I think are the ones that are there. And so I feel a big level of responsibility to push the ecosystem to really think that way versus find us the CEO who's had the $1 billion exit and has done it 3 times, because there aren't that many of them, and I'm not sure that those playbooks are actually going to work for where we're headed today.
And so, yeah, I am so appreciative of that focus. You have been always a strong leader and proponent for advancing women and women leaders. I also appreciated that you called out the importance of every day, every company's workforce today is multi-generational. I think we're on like 5 or 6, even generations in a workforce. So there's complexity there. Women leaders have particularly excellent skills to deal with some of those complexities. And I'm glad that you're drawing them out. I want to close out this Inspiring Women interview. You, in your bio, you proudly note that you're raising the next generation of strong women. So just the advice for others that you give your own daughters who are becoming their own leaders. How did you raise them? What advice do you give to other women leaders?
Yeah, I mean, as you also know, parenting is not perfect either, right? We all learn along the way in that way. But I think the one of my mottos is life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And if you put yourself in uncomfortable positions, you grow the most. And don't be afraid of failure or nonlinear paths. And don't be afraid to, do what you think is right. And again, so my oldest daughter actually is also in the Peace Corps now. She's just
Ah,
joined and she's in South America. I'm very proud of her. She had a great marketing job at a private equity backed business opportunity and just said, hey, I'm going to try this. Right. And she's new language, new culture and environment volunteer. She's had to navigate changes within putting herself in a brand new
yeah.
place and learning how to build relationships with people. And I think ultimately it's those first principles, like really try to understand people, particularly the ones that are very different. We live a blessed life. And so, we're fortunate. So how do you understand how other people think? And you've got to be really curious in order to do that. You be patient in terms of what that is, and ultimately be kind. Because I think back to this world of uncertainty, everybody comes from different places in the way that they were raised and the way that they think about things, again, values. And so how do you learn about that? And then how do you apply that to whatever job or, group of people you are interacting with in order to be successful for the future?
I absolutely love that. Living on the edge of your comfort zone, being curious and being kind. This has been such a great inspiring women conversation. I've been speaking with Sonia Millsom. Sonia, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. This is a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you taking the time.
What a powerful conversation that was.